After the reinstatement of the capital punishment, only 2 people were executed in Oregon. Douglas Franklin Wright, September 6, 1996. American serial killer Douglas Franklin Wright killed at least 7 people in Oregon between 1969 and 1991. For 3 of these killings, he received a capital sentence, and in 1996 he was put to death in the Oregon State Penitentiary, making history as the state's first execution since 1962. Additionally, he was the first individual in Oregon to be executed by lethal injection. Wright was born in Spirit Lake, Iowa on March 25, 1940. His mother abandoned him, and his father was an alcoholic. Psychological evaluations state that Wright was essayed and physically abused repeatedly as a child. He was expelled from the Marines and became a dropout from high school after molesting a 5-year-old child in California. Wright confessed to a probation officer that he had molested over 70 small boys. He was convicted of many burglaries at the beginning of the 1960s and given an 8-year prison term. Margaret Rosenberry, 71, was the victim of a break-in by Wright on September 4, 1969, in Portland, Oregon. Her family knew him and they were friends with him. Wright killed Rosenberry and her granddaughter Gail Snelling, 27, as soon as she entered the house. Using a handgun, he shot Snelling twice in the head, killing her, and shot Rosenberry 3 times, killing her as well. He then kidnapped Snelling's 5-year-old son and took him to a number of nearby motels where he molested him. Eventually, Wright released the boy. He eluded authorities for more than a month after they launched a manhunt for him. After shooting a man in a billiards hall in Banks, he was apprehended in the end. Wright received a 35-year prison term after being found guilty of killing Snelling and Rosenberry. Wright responded that he had always desired a son of his own when asked why he killed them. In 1982, Wright, who was regarded as a model prisoner, was granted parole. After being freed, though, he carried out a number of armed robberies and threatened to kill anyone who stood in his way. Wright kidnapped 10-year-old Luke Threadway from Portland on May 23, 1984. As Threadway was leaving a friend's house to return home, he grabbed him from the streets. After that, he took the boy back to his flat, where he spent the next 3 days abusing him. He shot Threadway 6 times in the early hours of May 25 to murder him. Following Wright's disposal of the body, the case remained unsolved for more than a decade. Wright was given 30 years after being detained in 1984 for the armed robberies. He was released again in June 1991. Wright posted job openings in October 1991, offering homeless men in Portland $10 per hour to clean bush at a youth camp. On October 20, Randy Scott Henry, 26 years old, and Anthony Sean Nelson, 31 years old, both homeless, accepted Wright's job offer. Wright picked them up and drove them to a secluded location on the Warm Springs Indian Reservation, away from Portland. After that, he offered them drinks while driving into the desert. Wright used a revolver to shoot Nelson in the head. He then fired at Henry as he leaped out of the car and fled. After making his way back to Portland and reaching the interstate, Henry called the police. The cops were brought directly to Wright by Henry and another witness. Then it was discovered that Wright had murdered 3 additional individuals in a manner similar to Nelson's. The victims, who were all killed in October 1991, were identified as Anthony Barker, 27, William Marks, 23, and William Davis, 37. Wright had used the false promise of job to entice the 3 victims, all homeless men, to a secluded part of Wesco County on the Warm Springs Indian Reservation. He then used the pistol to shoot each of them in the head, killing them all. Later on, Wesco County found him guilty of these killings. Wright was found guilty of killing Marks, Davis, and Barker. A federal court also indicted him for Nelson's murder. Wright was never formally charged with Nelson's murder because, according to the law, he would have needed to stand trial in a federal court since Nelson was a Maca Indian. Because it is a federal violation under the Major Crimes Act to kill a Native American on an Indian reservation, Wright would have faced trial in the Nelson case if he had not withdrawn from his appeals process. He was found guilty of aggravated murder on June 25, 1993, in connection with the 3 killings. He was given a death sentence on October 11, 1993, for the killings of Marks, Davis, and Barker. Following his sentencing, Wright requested a quicker execution by waiving his right to appeal. He admitted to the 1984 kidnapping, molestation, and murder of Luke Treadway in a letter to the Oregonian writer just before his execution. The case remained unsolved as of 1996. Wright went on to say, "On the morning of September 6, I'm going to be gone, and as far as I'm concerned, I'm gone forever. I'm living a very violent past, and I'm a very evil person. I've done nothing but bad all my life, and I wanted to do one good thing before I left. I want to bring light to the death of Luke Treadway because it affected me very deeply." In an attempt to give them closure, he also extended an invitation to Treadway's family to see his execution. However, they turned it down. Wright was put to death on September 6, 1996, via lethal injection. It was the state's first execution following Gregg and the first in Oregon in 34 years. Wright is still the first of just 2 people to be put to death in Oregon since the death penalty was reinstated. Harry Charles Moore, a killer found guilty in 1997, was the other. Both begged for the execution to go forward and renounced their appeals. Wright was put to death on the same day as another serial killer executed in South Carolina, Michael Torrance. Harry Charles Moore, May 16, 1997. American killer Harry Charles Moore was put to death in Oregon for the 1992 killings of Thomas Lowry and Barbara Cunningham. He was the most recent execution in Oregon since 1978 and was the second person to be put to death there. On June 5, 1992, Moore used a 9mm handgun in front of a Salem post office to shoot Thomas Lowry 4 times in the face. He then took a car to Barbara Cunningham's house, where he shot her 3 times in the head after striking her in the belly. Lowry was the ex-husband of Moore's half-sister, Cunningham. According to Moore, he killed them because he believed they would travel to Las Vegas with his divorced wife and infant daughter, exposing them to a life of drug use and prostitution. Moore received a death sentence on July 20, 1993. Later on, he made a threat to sue anyone attempting to halt his execution. In a further appeal, he asked the Oregon Supreme Court to revoke his sentence's automatic appeal. Moore's final dinner was a platter of fresh fruit, 2 2-liter bottles of Coke, 2 green apples, and 2 red apples. Moore begged the warden to lend him the jail keys just before the execution, pledging to bring them right back. The request was turned down. "I want Jennifer, Jennifer, to be the last word I say," Moore muttered as he lay dying. Moore's daughter, via his niece Cindy Moore, is named Jennifer. Throughout his life, he had been married to 2 of his nieces. On May 16, 1997, Moore was put to death by lethal injection. Governor John Kitzhaber of Oregon canceled the scheduled execution and ordered an examination of the state's death sentence program in November 2011, announcing a moratorium on executions in the state. Governor Kate Brown, who succeeded Kitzhaber, reaffirmed her support for the moratorium. Oregon no longer permits non-unanimous juries in felony cases. A unanimous jury verdict is required in all felony cases, including capital cases. Even if one juror voted against the death penalty, a life sentence is imposed in the event of a hung jury during the punishment phase of the trial. A retrial is not allowed. The only person in charge of clemency in Oregon, including capital cases, is the governor. Aggravated murder is the only crime punishable by death in Oregon. On August 1, 2019, Governor Kate Brown signed a bill that restricts the death penalty to 4 cases: acts of terrorism in which 2 or more people are killed by an organized terrorist group, premeditated murders of children aged 13 or younger, prison murders committed by those already incarcerated for aggravated murder, premeditated murders of police or correctional officers. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.